Okay, well, it's about a little after 9 a.m., so as people are still trickling in, I think we can go ahead and get started. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us here today. My name is Meg Fowler. I'm a project scientist here at the National Center for Atmospheric Research, or NCAR, and I'm a member of the AMS Committee on Hydrology. And I am so thrilled to welcome you to the next Their Career, Their Stories webinar, which this time we're honored to be co-hosting with the AMS Student Committee and AMS Grade. So we started holding these webinars after the 2020 annual meeting as a way to kind of increase the frequency of discussions we're having around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the many different experiences that have been faced by members of the same broader AMS community. This webinar series gives us all a chance to share experiences and learn from one another about the challenges and successes so many of us have faced, and hopefully give us ideas on how to support one another as both colleagues and friends. Today's panel in particular is going to focus on the stories and experiences of students, both graduates and undergraduates. I think a lot of us are aware that college and grad school can be challenging under the best of circumstances, but this last year has really exacerbated those challenges and introduced some new ones. So today we hope to learn from our amazing panelists of students and advisors, how can you cope with the many stressors of student life? How can you maintain your mental health, build resiliency, and support one another, especially in the face of COVID-19? So first, I'd like to hand it over briefly to the social media chair of our AMS Hydrology Subcommittee, Matt Beischer.
Thank you, Meg, and thank you to everyone who's here and for all the attendees and all the excellent panelists that we've gotten together. I just want to quickly say two things, and then we'll get on to the other fantastic people on this panel. First of all, a huge shout out to Meg and Margaret for really spearheading this latest edition of Their Career, Their Stories webinar series that the Hydro Committee hosts throughout the year. This started as a fantastic panel discussion at the last AMS annual meeting and has really continued to grow as a webinar series throughout the year. So hopefully we can keep that going. And second, if you have any topics that you would like to see discussed about this, or you feel that there is a topic that is not discussed enough in our field, I'm sure there are plenty of them. Feel free to let us know. We're on social media at AMS Hydrology on Twitter, or you can email our committee from the AMS website, and we're happy to host webinars based on what y'all want to see and what y'all want to hear. So that's all I want to say, other than my extreme gratitude to the folks on my subcommittee and on the AMS committee subcommittee for diversity and inclusion led by Guilang, and to Braid and to the student conference planning committee. So I'm going to hand it over to Meg again, and she'll continue with things going on here. So.
Perfect, thanks, Matt. Great points. I'd also like to share the floor with our DEI chair on the AMS Hydrology Committee, Guilang.
Thanks, Meg. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh. Hi, everyone. I'm Guilang Wang, Professor of Environmental Engineering at the University of Connecticut. I'm very excited to meet you all here. I want to say that students are very important members of our AMS community and of our hydrology family for sure. Your wellness is really the wellness of our future. We, the members of the committees, are here as your allies, your advocates. So on that note, please don't hesitate to reach out down the road if there is something we could be of help. As chair of the DEI subcommittee, I consider diversity of career paths an important asset of our community. So no matter where your career takes you in the future, I hope you will remain a member of our AMS family. Thank you. Thanks, Meg.
Thanks, Guilang. Yes, you are the lifeblood of everything we do, so we're here for you. And my final introduction before I get to our panelists is to my amazing co-host, Margaret Orr, who is also a co-chair of the AMS Student Conference. Margaret?
Hey y'all, I'm Margaret Orr. I'm currently a second-year PhD student at the George Mason University Center for Climate Change Communication, where I study climate misinformation as a research focus. And like Meg said, I'm also a co-chair of the AMS Student Conference Planning Committee this year. I am super excited to get to welcome you all to this webinar today. And as a reminder, we'd love for this to be as interactive as possible. So please submit questions for our panelists via the chat. Meg and I will be monitoring that chat for messages as we go along. If you would prefer to submit an anonymous question, feel free to send a direct chat either to myself or to Meg, and we can answer your question without mentioning your name.
Perfect. Thank you, Margaret. Okay, then without further ado, let's introduce our panelists. So we are joined today by Anjali Nieves Jimenez, who was born in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and is currently a senior undergraduate student there at the University of Puerto Rico Mayagüez campus. She majors in industrial engineering with a curricular sequence in meteorology and atmospheric sciences. And during the summer, she works here at NCAR as a source protege. So welcome. We are also joined by Anthony Wilson, who is starting out as a graduate student at the Scripps Institute of Oceanography at the University of California, San Diego. He is pursuing his PhD in climate science and has a passion for all things climate extremes. And he was also a UCAR source protege and a McNair scholar who enjoys mentoring. Welcome. Next up, we are joined by Carolina Vieri from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign campus, where she is a fifth-year grad student working on her PhD, and where she's also received her master's. Before this, she served as an AmeriCorps member for a year and received her bachelor's in atmospheric science from Cornell University. Carolina's research is focused on land-atmosphere interactions and hydroclimate, primarily in South America. Continuing the NCAR connections, Carolina also spent a summer there as an advanced study program visitor. Welcome. And last but far from least, we have Dr. Andy Grunstein from the University of Georgia at Athens, where he is a professor of geography, and he works mostly on the intersection of climate and human health. Andy is currently also the director of the graduate studies program for geography at UGA, and is a CIMER trained mentor, which stands for the Center of Improvement of Mentored Experiences in Research. So Andy's actually received training on how to mentor students and help build their success and wellness. So we look forward to learning more about that and the skills that you've gained there. So to start things off, I'd like to open it up to our panelists to introduce themselves further and give a few opening remarks on their own experiences during the pandemic. So to start, I will hand the mic over to Andy.
Okay, thanks. And Megan, Margaret, thank you for inviting me here. I think this is a really great topic to talk about. So as you had said, I'm the director of graduate studies. So I got a real kind of high level view of what was going on in our program. I'm involved in admissions. I work with our current students to complete their degree requirements. I get to do good stuff like, awards, and then a lot of troubleshooting. So I got to see a lot of impacts from COVID. Some of the big stuff that I saw was our international students were really impacted. A lot of them, had trouble getting visas. We had 2 students that we admitted that couldn't actually get here for a year. So we actually had to work with our graduate school to figure out what to do there. We had another student who started several weeks late, again, because of visa issues tied to COVID. Our in-house students also faced a lot of challenges. Some students that had field work had that delayed. We had one student that actually was, got a grant to go another country and study, actually had to come back to the US during the pandemic. So a lot of students had those kinds of delays. Our students last year, we had this hybrid model online teaching. So a lot of our TAs had to struggle with a new mode of teaching and, dealing with just concerns about, getting sick in the classroom and so forth. I think just talking to students, a lot of issues about isolation, less contact with their advisors, and I can talk about mentoring a little bit later on, but I think those kind of issues were going on. So there were a lot of things going on with COVID, and I don't want to use up all the time here, but I was able to see a lot of these things, and I can talk later on about some of the ways that we try to address them.
Meg, you're muted.
I am. Thank you, Margaret. This is why you're here. Thanks, Andy. Those are fantastic points and ones that I think are often overlooked. I will also turn over the mic next to Carolina.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. I guess I can speak from the perspective of being kind of a later stage graduate student and the transition that I underwent during the beginning of the pandemic. For me, just speaking from my experience, it was difficult to transition from working in the office. That was something that worked really well for me, just having that routine and being in the same space every day where I could focus, kind of get down to work, and then, not having that routine, not having that, change of space from home and work really affected me, I think. And so And that's something that I heard from a lot of the other graduate students in my department. And of course, you know, the things that were already mentioned regarding isolation was something that I felt and that a lot of other graduate students in my department felt. And so I think that took a lot of time and energy to adjust to at the beginning of the pandemic. And I think eventually, you know, I got to a place where I got used to it, but I really noticed how it affected my work. But one thing that you know, and I can talk about this more later too, but one thing that helped me at least was, you know, kind of taking things one day at a time. You know, there was obviously so much going on in the world. And so being a graduate student is stressful in the first place. And then, you know, having the added stress of everything going on with COVID was just a lot. So for me, it was just kind of taking it one day at a time. And I was very fortunate to have an advisor, still have an advisor who's very understanding and was, you know, her mentorship style, I think, really helped get me and the other students in my group through that time. So I can talk about that a little bit more later. But yeah, those are just some thoughts from me right off the bat. But yeah, I'm excited to hear from everybody else too.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I love the idea of taking it one day at a time. I think that's the best we can hope to do right now. Anthony?
Hi everyone, I'm Anthony Wilson, and I'm grateful to be here as well. As mentioned, I am a first-year grad student at the Scripps Institute of Oceanography, and I'm getting my PhD in climate science. And I guess for me, I can speak on a perspective of being a senior and applying for grad school in the middle of a pandemic. So I essentially had to move 2 times. So I first had to move um, from Michigan because I was an out-of-state student, and I had to move all of my things back within a certain period of time. And I also had to recently move to California um, for my PhD. So I can speak on kind of the experiences of one, the isolation, but also applying during COVID. I feel like that is a very unique experience of having, and then also speaking a little bit of the financial strains of what comes with applying and as far as that goes. So I guess that's more of what I can speak on, and also the protests that happened over the summer.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. That's getting into grad school and applying is not cheap, and especially with last summer, it's a tough time to be working through things. So I appreciate it. And next up, we have Anjali.
Hi, thank you for inviting me. It's really an honor. And I have to go with what Anthony has spoken of, the uncertainty of where are we going to move? Where are we gonna stay? Many students, and I'm going to speak for a lot of them because I had to go through that as well. What are we going to do with our dorms? Are we going to be able to come back? Do we have to move entirely? Even with the apartments and rents and the living expenses, how are we going to do this? And it is something that really caught everyone off guard, not only the students. And financially, maybe you were at a point that you weren't stable, and many students weren't. So they are at a point where they were thinking about the future and its uncertainty. And we don't have, as an undergrad, we don't have our life set up yet. We have part-time jobs. Many students also got laid of their jobs, and that created unnecessary stress in the students, and they didn't know where to fit in at that point. They didn't know where to ask for help because everyone, you didn't learn like when you were growing up, you didn't learn how to confront this situations, right? So that was the most stressful part as an undergrad. You know, have your life set, you are very uncertain of the future. how are you going to address that? Yeah, and that's like the main point of what I can talk during this webinar.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's you know, again, you've all raised such fantastic points of how the many ways this has been challenging for students in particular is enormous. Okay, so I want to dive into our discussion a bit further. I'd like to remind the audience this is an interactive discussion, so please do feel free to send in your chats, your questions, things of that nature, and we'll monitor that. But to kick it off, I noticed, you know, there's sort of this trend of needing support, and Carolina, you mentioned having a mentor who has been supportive and really helped. And so I'm wondering, for you in particular, do you have examples of, you know, what have mentors and advisors done that have been supportive and successful in helping you navigate this?
I think for me, something that was important was just having an open line of communication. And right at the beginning of the pandemic, right off the bat, my advisor said to us, us being me and the other students of my group, she said, you know, if you need anything, just, you know, call me, text me, email me. You know, she made sure that that line of communication was there right from the start. And you know, she was checking in with us as well. So I think for me, that was just really comforting to have right off the bat, just to know that I could let her know if something was really affecting me that day, or, you know, I let her know that, you know, I can't get this done today. She was just, you know, very open right off, right at the start of things, you know, letting us know that she's there for us, that even though, you know, she was going through a lot herself, you know, she had some adjustments to make with her kids and all of that. You know, I really appreciated that she just was there for us from the very beginning. Yeah, so I'd say that's one main thing. I don't know about everybody else, but that was something that was really important for me.
Yeah, I can talk in the perspective of doing an internship and having a mentor. It's many students go to an internship and maybe it's their first REU and they don't know how to do research. Something that helped me that my mentor recommended is that we do daily check-ins. So that helped 30-minute check-ins because you know that someone is looking out for you. And meeting daily will let this person know how is your mood changing from day to day, and if they have seen something different from yesterday and now today, like, oh, this changed, are you okay, do you need something, do you need help? And you know, staying in your house in COVID and not being able to talk to someone, and this being your only opportunity to be able to communicate and having that sense of support is really needed and appreciated.
Yeah, those are great points. Yeah. Anthony, I know you were in transition, right? You're moving and dealing with all this. Were there any standouts that were offering support for you over the last year?
Yeah, I was gonna say that for me, how I made my decision was basically how I was kind of like treated during this kind of between period. So I graduated in December of 2020, so I was taking a gap semester, and so before COVID hit, I had an internship lined up, but unfortunately, due to funding, they were no longer able to provide that internship. So my PI now at Scripps offered to pay me during this period of time and make sure that I was okay during this time. So that for me was great, and he had no stipulations to the pay. I could have attended a different university. So it was really kind of just that I see you, even though you're not here, I still care for you as a student. That was really stand out for me. So
Yeah, that's fantastic. And it's nice to hear that, you know, professors and mentors are really reaching out to support students this way. That's fantastic to hear. Yeah, I guess Andy, for you from a more of an institutional level, you know, what have what have you found useful for supporting your students and the department right now?
Yeah, so there's a few things that we did. I had mentioned that a lot of our students had their research delayed, and funding is a huge stress for graduate students. So one of the things our department decided to do was to reallocate some of our funds for students that were impacted by COVID to give them another year of funding. So I thought that was a really great way to help students and reduce their stress so they could reorient their work and get things done. I think one of the other things is talking, I guess, at a little lower level as from the perspective of as an advisor. We're talking about mentoring here. I think, good mentoring goes a long way towards helping support our students. And I've kind of heard some nice examples about how good communication is really important. And I think especially during the pandemic, but I think always it's really important is for us to very clearly convey to our students that it's okay to take care of yourself, that it's okay to take breaks. It's okay to, give yourself some time to recover because we are in a really stressful period. And I think hearing that from your advisors, giving you you should take care of yourself, just like, athletes, right? They're not pushing themselves 100% all the time. They take breaks to rest and recover. And I think that's something we need to share with our students. And I think really simple things, just kind of what I've heard from other people, just an email to someone checking in, how you doing? Is everything okay? I'm around if you need me for something. I think are really simple ways just to kind of stay connected with our students.
Yeah. Great, thanks, Andy. You led right into another one of our submitted questions that I'll open up and I guess start with Anjali, and then I'll go through the panel. Have you altered your communication style as a result of the pandemic? Like, are there apps or platforms that you've found to be particularly useful for staying connected or productive as we're all kind of working from home?
Yeah, well, I always wasn't like a message type of person. I am always a phone call away because I like to hear people's voices, and I believe that things can be interpreted differently via message. So it was always our email or text. So what I have changed is that I always now FaceTime or try to FaceTime or do like a web video, like a meeting, a Google Meets or a Microsoft Teams, a Zoom, just because it is more approachable to see the person, to see how they're doing, and also you can better interpret what that person is trying to say to you. So I believe that now being via video is the best way. I have changed my communication style.
Great, thanks, Anjali. I'll bring it over to Carolina next.
Yeah, this is a great question. I really had to think about it. But so, I mean, for me in particular, my department really kept in touch through Slack. And that was something that I had not used a lot before the pandemic. And we still use it a lot just to keep in touch. And I found that, I don't know, for whatever reason, it's really easy for us to talk about work stuff or personal stuff or whatever, check in with each other, especially at the beginning of the pandemic. I also realized that, like at the beginning of the pandemic or before that, I wasn't somebody who really liked to talk on the phone or like, I don't know, like have video calls so much, but maybe because I'm a little bit more reserved, I'm kind of shy. Like I get anxiety with phone calls and stuff like that. But then I realized that how much more efficient that is to talk to people that way. So I'd be like, at the beginning of the pandemic, I'd be writing these long emails or, taking the time to do that. And I'm like, wait, I should just, pick up the phone and call this person or do a video chat because it's so much more efficient to work through issues, especially research things, work through those types of things in that mode of communication. So that was something I realized for myself, and that something that worked really well. And then, I still take advantage of since I'm still kind of in a hybrid thing, working from home and working in the office. So yeah, that's my experience.
Thanks, Karina. Same here. Definitely had to get over the phone call, Zoom call anxiety and just realize, get it done. Anthony, I'll throw it to you next.
Yeah, I was gonna say I had a similar experience. A lot of what we used was Slack, GroupMe, and another one I haven't heard is Discord. I never used Discord before. This is my first experience using that. But also I would find myself I would get a lot of emails, and now I would see a lot of these emails turning to Zoom calls. So that was something that I had to kind of adjust and like get used to. Um, and I would say the one pro out of this was that um, during my orientation, um, when I was applying for grad schools, all were virtual. So when I accepted at Scripps, I was able to connect with everyone within my incoming class and create a group me way far in advance of classes. So we kind of already have that community kind of built before class even started. So there was some pros that came out of the virtual space. So
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. And I will throw it back to Andy to bring us home on this question.
Okay, yeah, no, I mean, it's a great question. I think lots have changed in a year and a half. One of the things I've actually, even though we're probably all feeling a bit of like Zoom fatigue or, variations of this, I've seen some real advantages, like reaching out to people from other institutions so I could have meetings with, introduce my students to other people and actually have those sort of virtual meetings I never used before. I even, like a lot of people, went hybrid teaching. So I have a student at UGA was sitting in on a class at UConn to pick up things, and she was able to do that with some of these new technologies that really I had never used much before. So I do see certain advantages and things that I probably will continue to use even as we kind of edge out of the pandemic, hopefully soon.
Yeah, those are great points. I think Slack and Zoom are probably here to stay. So it's good that we're learning those skills now. So we have another submitted question, and maybe just bigger picture. If you were to reflect on, what tends to be the primary sources of stress for you, have they actually changed or shifted during the pandemic, or have they kind of stayed the same and just been exacerbated? And did the pandemic shift some of your career and life priorities as a result of those? So what's kind of been your experience with that? And I will start maybe with Anthony. Oh, and I think you're muted.
sorry about that. So I would say for me, I think on the pandemic, the issues and the occurrences that were happening within society were kind of amplified because you only could see your space and then your phone, essentially. So there's a lot of societal issues that for me that I was trying to deal with the protests that were happening over the summer, kind of the changes that were being called on within the geosciences. Um, that was a very difficult uh, thing for me to kind of deal with and kind of occur, but it kind of it steered me into a direction of where I wanted to change policies within my own program and my undergrad, which is really great. And it also allowed me to be a beacon within my incoming PhD program to kind of inspire change. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, serving as an inspiration is huge, right? Even if this is not how we want to have to do it. It's fantastic. Yeah. Carolina, how about for you?
Oh man, this is such a hard question. For me, I think it actually helped me work through a lot of the things that routinely stressed me out before the pandemic. I think having a lot of alone time was not good in a lot of ways, but it did give me a lot of time to reflect and kind of think about maybe that's the one thing I would say, at least for me, one good thing that came out of all of this is having that time to reflect and work through some of my anxieties, work through some of the things that I had always been insecure about in my grad school career, and also learn a lot of coping strategies. I don't know if, this is so related to the question, but I really relied on a lot of coping strategies to get myself through like the most stressful parts of earlier in the pandemic, and those are things that I still use. And yeah, I would say that I'm maybe not as stressed out about the same things that I used to be at the beginning of the pandemic, just because I had time to reflect. A lot of those things were related to, I guess, imposter syndrome for me, and I think I had a lot of time to work through that. Yeah, I think I answered the question. I can't remember. I was just, I was focusing on the stress part. I think there might have been another part of that question, but yeah, that's my answer for now.
Yeah, that's huge. And working through imposter syndrome is like a lifelong, battle. So you're making progress. That's huge. Yeah. Andy, how have things shifted for you?
Sure. Well, let me first kind of, again, talk at kind of my role as a graduate coordinator. Like I saw a lot of you talking about stress and anxiety. And I guess one of the silver linings of COVID, this whole pandemic, is that it really did bring to light the importance of talking about a lot of these problems, and also recognizing there are resources there for people for support. And I know a lot more people are using, on campus, we have resources to support students broadly in wellness, but also for mental health and so forth. So I think that's a really kind of a healthy change. Hopefully that will continue on since then. But just in terms of my own personal life, I had a slightly different experience than I know many of our grad students would, have their own apartment and be really isolated. I was stuck in a house with my family. My kids were at home, learning. So I would be in a meeting like this, and my 11-year-old would bust through the door with a math question or something. So again, it was hard to juggle that work-life balance, I think, and really got me thinking about, how do I work more efficiently? How do I also take care of myself so that I'm in good position to help, my students and so forth. And hopefully those kinds of things that I've been thinking about will continue after the pandemic, just in terms of, being healthy, taking care of yourself, and also trying to get a healthy balance between your work life and, your home life and so forth.
Yeah, also a lifelong struggle. It's good to hear you're also dealing with it. So thanks, Andy. Anjali.
Yeah, so like no one was prepared for COVID-19, right? We didn't expect this to happen. And many of us had a lot of plans. And many students got very frustrated because they weren't able to fulfill those plans. For example, I am a very organized person, and I have my plans from here on to maybe 2 years, and I want to do this and this and this and this, and everything is put out. And you have now to wait to put all your cards on the table and try to change things that fit your lifestyle that you have right now, and having in your mind that it may not turn the way you want to. And I think that is something that many students struggled with, because like Anthony mentioned, internships got canceled. Many opportunities like field experiments got postponed or even canceled. Classes that you were supposed to take this semester got postponed to next semester, and now you are not able to graduate. What are you going to do at that point? Are you gonna continue on and work during that semester? How are you going to deal with that balance? And yeah, it affected everyone in different ways, and the stress for everyone is going to come in different ways. Different factors can have ways in that. But I think that every situation and every circumstance everyone was in matters, even if one was like sufficiently harder than the other, because at that moment, you don't know the position where the students or the person, the professor is at, the support they have, and the financial stability. So I think the stress may come from different areas, not just from one in particular. And it may be a stress that you have already, or it may be a new one that you didn't know that was coming your way, and now you have to deal with a variety of things.
Yeah, that's a lot to juggle, and a great point. We don't know where everyone else is at. Awesome. I will turn it over to Margaret for the next question.
Yeah, something I've seen to describe the pandemic is that we're all in the same ocean, but we don't all have the same boat. So some people might be navigating this in a little kayak, and some people might be just fine in their big yacht. I liked that as a kind of metaphor for what we're going through. So our next question, I will start with a variant of this question for Andy and then turn it over to our student panelists. So the question is, what strategies have you used for maintaining your mental and physical health, not just during a challenging year, 18 months, but also during what can be a key stage of your career? So I'll let Andy kick us off with what strategies have you seen used, what strategies have you liked that you've seen used by students in the department?
So, I mean, I can talk kind of what I do, because I think, we're talking about students, but I think, everyone was feeling this. I know like faculty were feeling stressed. There's a lot of pressures in all of us. I could just, for me, I think making, just taking care of myself, eating healthy for me, exercise is super important. Just that helps me relieve stress. Getting enough sleep. I'm super grouchy if I don't get enough sleep. And I try to encourage that in my students to just kind of broadly healthy living. And just going back to what I mentioned before, having that conversation, as a mentor to my students, that it's okay to take breaks, but also take care of yourself. Take time out to do something you enjoy, whether it's exercising or some other activity, or Margaret, it could be ice skating, other activities that you enjoy to, give you a break from things. And I know during COVID, sometimes that was more challenging, but, if you could take a walk outside or just, step away for a little bit. And also, again, use resources that are available. Like if people are having challenges with serious mental health problems like depression or anxiety, that, get help, because it's okay. I'm glad more people are talking about it now. And, making sure to convey that it's okay to look into these other resources.
Definitely. One of my favorite things, for those who don't know, Andy was my master's advisor, and he would send an email before like a defense or comms or something, like, it's 5 p.m., stop what you're doing and please go relax. I will turn it over to Anthony next.
Yeah, I think Andy said it best. I think another grad student told me the work will still be there, the PhD will still be there, but your mental health, can go very south if you don't take care of it. So yeah, I'm a big proponent of, especially during the pandemic, I was trying to just eat better, and then also I would tell myself to stop after a certain point, because I'm always on my computer and my work is on my computer. So I would try to meaningfully leave my laptop in a space to where I could not reach it, because I'm the type of person, when I sit down, I just continue to work and I don't stop. Um, so I would give myself timers, and then also I would try to, after every time I would do something, I would kind of would reward myself with some like personal time to just kind of sit and do whatever I want to do. I think it was kind of those kind of rewards for my like mental health and my mind helped me kind of get through the cycle and the pandemic, I would say. So yeah.
Thanks, Anthony. I love that technique of like hiding your laptop, 'cause especially with work from home, like it's right there. So I love that. Might start doing that myself, because we're still a little bit hybrid too. Carolina, what are your thoughts and strategies?
So for me, I echo a lot of what was already said. I think realizing that, well, I realized during the pandemic that it really helps me to have kind of my basic needs taken care of, which sounds like an obvious thing, but I struggled with that all, my whole graduate school career before that, just taking care of those basic things like sleep, eating well, exercise, having time to myself. I think, we probably all struggle with that. But I I realized just the importance of all of that, especially sleep for myself. Just getting back to the basics of those fundamental things, that we should be doing for ourselves just to take care of ourselves. And I realized like how much that helped my mental health when I did those things. I also kind of explored my own hobbies, kind of explored things that I had never had time to explore before. So I got really into houseplants, for instance, and just taking time to take care of them, and kind of have something that I'm doing that's not work related, but is still productive, because I am one of those people where I get mad at myself if I feel like I'm not being productive all the time, which is a whole other thing. I know a lot of us probably struggle with that too. But I mean, that helped me. And personally, going outside a lot, just making myself get out of the house, get out of my head too, because I'm the kind of person that will get anxious and then start to ruminate about things. So those are all things that worked really well for me, and things that I still use now. So when I have a lot going on in my work life, my personal life, like I'm getting back to the basics of those things, and then I find that helps me a lot. So yeah.
Thanks, Carly. Yes, thanks, Carolina. Yeah, a nice pandemic walk outside is definitely a fun thing. Anjali, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm a very big coffee person, and during the mornings, what I do is that I take my time with no distractions. I have my breakfast and I have my coffee, and it's just me with my breakfast and my coffee, because I know that once I touch the computer during that time, I was gonna stay in the computer and keep on writing emails and keep on studying, keep on jumping from meeting to meeting. So I would take my personal time during the morning, and during the afternoons, well, you said you can go for walks and all that. I'm supposed to be a very active person, but sometimes I'm not. And I noticed that during COVID. So I noticed that I was going to be at the university a long time. I was from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. and I didn't have time for all these things that I now do because of COVID. And I started, you need grace for yourself, because once you start and notice that is important, you're not gonna let that go. So yes, you need to give yourself grace. And that is something that I have learned, to give yourself time, grace, and do physical activities, also reaching out to students and your peers and colleagues, because that's important as well.
Thanks, Anjali. So as we move towards getting started on wrapping things up a little bit, I want everyone to maybe think for a second. This might be a big ask, to pick one lesson or strategy that you've taken from the last year and a half being in the pandemic that you want to keep with you moving forward. So one thing that you found maybe especially helpful, one thing, like if you were to give one piece of lasting advice to all of our attendees, what would that one lesson or strategy be that you want to keep moving forward? So I know we'll give everyone a moment. I know that's kind of a big one to pick one. And I guess we'll start with Anthony.
Yeah, I think this is a great question. I would say for me, the biggest lesson that I've learned as a perfectionist that I am is to be open to the door that you don't expect. I feel like, during the pandemic, we got a lot of curveballs that were thrown at all of us, and it's just being kind of open to the shots, and then knowing that at the end, everything's going to be okay. So.
Thanks, Anthony. I will send it to Anjali next.
Yeah, so okay. It's okay not to be okay. That is something that I'm going to say, and I mean it when I say it. You, like all the students and all of the professors and everyone has gotten up to this point. You're gotten here, and I'm proud of everyone and you've pushed through. This was something unexpected and you tried to go around it and adapt yourself to it. In like less than a month, you had to do it. And this was something that you didn't expect, like I mentioned. And like Anthony said before, there is uncertainty in the future and many opportunities can arise from this uncertainty. And you may have this plan, you may have these other plans, and you may not fulfill it, but everything happens for a reason, and you're gonna have the support from everyone to follow your dreams and your goals. So reach out if you need help, because we're a big community, and that is what we're here for. You're not alone. And if you do need help, you can go and get help. That it does not mean anything. That does not mean that you're wrong. It means that you're standing up for yourself and you know what you need. So yes, I'm gonna leave with that.
Those are great points. Thanks, Anjali. Andy, if you want to go next.
Sure. Actually, I just want to kind of echo one of the things Anthony said. Is sort of these unexpected things that might actually turn out to be good. One of the things I found was when a lot of the conferences went virtual, I was kind of like groaned, like, oh, these are going to be terrible. We're on Zoom all the time. But for a lot of students, they were able to participate in like national or international conferences. I had 4 students participate in an international conference a week or 2 ago. That gave them experience that they probably couldn't afford to do. So I do see some, unexpected benefits of this if some of these continue in at least a hybrid format. The other thing that I think that I want to continue is just working, and I struggle with this too, these like work-life balances that I think we all juggle, and I think it's really important to try to create some boundaries because in academics especially, like you don't often have a normal work schedule. I end up working late at night a lot, and kind of having those boundaries to take care of yourself, and also just as a mentor, making sure that I am reinforcing those expectations in my students that stop working at 5 before you have a thesis defense, making sure they're aware of that stuff too, so that they learn this stuff, and when they move on, they can when they mentor their own students, they can pass those things on.
Yeah, great points. I like the investing in the future aspect of that and carrying on those mentoring traditions. And Carolina, last but not least on this question.
Okay, there's so many things going through my head. I think, so something that was said before about giving yourself grace, I think is something that has stuck in my head. It's been, something that I've been thinking about for a while, and something that I've taken away from this, and I think others could take away from this whole experience is, giving yourself grace. I think, I guess speaking from the perspective of, a late stage graduate student too, I think we forget that we're not robots and we're humans, and also, academics in general, like we think that there has to be this very, this view of our work that's very objective, where we don't let we don't realize that there's a human side of us. We think that we have to be like robots and conduct our work that way as well. And that's not true at all. Like, we are humans, we have needs, we have, other parts of ourselves that we need to process. And that's really important, I think, going forward to strengthen our scientific community and strengthen ourselves as well. But I think giving yourself grace and giving others grace, realizing that, we're human. We are all affected by this in different ways. It's also like this collective trauma that we're going to be dealing with for a long time. So just remembering that, taking it one day at a time, I think is really important.
Thanks, Carolina, and thank you all. Those are all excellent points. We're all human, I think, is a fantastic one. Just write it down and like keep it on a post-it note at my computer. There's only so much we can do. And like you said, this is going to be lasting. So we need these coping mechanisms and our strategies to get through however much longer this is going to go on. So I appreciate it from all of you. Okay, Well, I think this is about the time of the webinar where we can start wrapping things up. So I'd first like to give a huge thank you to our panelists for sharing your experiences with us. I know it's a hard thing to do to be this vulnerable, but we really do appreciate it. And I think we've all learned a lot. So thank you. And I'd like to give you all a chance to offer up your own closing remarks. If you have any final thoughts of, advice or, things you're thinking about with this topic as we move forward. So I will offer Carolina the first chance.
Oh man, I don't know how else to wrap this up. Yeah, I think just having more discussions like this, I think is really important, like whether that's with people in your department, people you work with, students you advise, fellow students, just being open, I think is like something else that we can take away from this, just communicating with people. And, like I said before, we forget that there's this human aspect to being a scientist. And I think connecting with that, with ourselves and with other people, I think going forward is really important. And maybe something that, was highlighted by this time of isolation, not only missing that human need to socialize with people. Well, maybe missing that made us realize like how important it is and how important it is for being a successful scientist, I think. So I don't know if that made sense, but I think that's just having that communication between people, between our colleagues, and communication with ourselves too is really, really important going forward when we kind of finally get out of this and, go on in the future. Yeah.
I love it. Thanks, Carolina. Next, we'll go to Anthony.
Yeah, I guess for me, to end out, I just want to kind of like reiterate kind of similar words, just giving grace again. I feel like we say that a lot, but I feel like we don't typically do that. The work is going to be there for you. Just remember we're still in the middle of a pandemic. So, whatever you get done today, it's okay. It's going to be all right. The world is not going to end if you don't get that assignment. Just ask for grace. I'm sure your professors, they as well need grace too. We're all going through it together. So.
Very true. Yes. Anjali?
Hi. So I just want to reiterate, sorry, what everyone has said. Like we're not robots. We do have a life outside of work and school. And we do need to appreciate what is surrounding us. For example, our families and friends that we do see in person, and we have the chance to talk with them and for them to talk about our daily, what has happened during our day. I think it is important to appreciate every moment that we have with that, because even though social media has been important during this process, it can also be a burden. And being on the phone and being on the computer all day can private you from all the joy that life has to give to you. So yes, and another thing that I wanted to put out there is that mental health is important, and it is important to take care of it. So, yes.
100% agree. Great point. And Andy, I will give you the last word.
All right. Someone who's a little later in my career than I think the rest of you, I can kind of say, looking back, I think what all of you says, like, it's going to be okay. Take care of yourself. And I think, since we're all scientists, that being a good scientist means being curious and asking good questions, right? And interesting questions. And you can't do that if you're really burnt out and exhausted and tired, right? You do that better when you're refreshed. And so I think the take home point is just make sure you do take care of yourselves.
Yeah, well put. I agree. I think that's the biggest thing we've heard today. Communicate and take care of yourself. You'll be better for it. So I'd like to thank you all again so much for spending the last hour with us, sharing your experiences. And I'd also like to thank everyone who's attended today. I know we are all Zoomed out, and I appreciate you taking the last hour to learn about other people's experiences and hopefully gain some insight that helps you as well. So if you'd like to stay up to date with our committees and get notified of future events like this, you can always follow us on Twitter, like Matt said. We're at AMS Hydrology. There's also at AMS Grade and at AMS Student Conf, and we're all very responsive on Twitter. So we look forward to seeing many of you again soon at other upcoming webinars and at January's annual meeting. So thank you. Have a great day, everyone.